Donahue interviewing Mr. Randy Clower to tell us about what the assassination was like 50 years ago. Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions?
Yes, you may.
Okay. How old were you?
At the time of the assassination?
Yes.
I was about your age. I was about to turn 10. I was just like a month away from being 10, and I was in the 4th grade.
How do you feel about the assassination?
Well, how do I feel about it? I'll tell you what was interesting about it for me was, you know how 4th graders usually don't care about the news?
Yeah.
Because you're a kid, you're having a good time, and this was the first time that the news grabbed me. I mean, I was so completely, shocked, like everybody was, what was going on in the country, that I actually sat and watched the news for hours and hours and hours with my family. So it was the first time that I was aware of a news story being that important. So that's how I felt about it. It was a huge moment in my life when I became aware that the world was a very big place.
Why did you feel this way? I mean, I know it's a lot to explain, but just can you give me a couple of details, like why?
Yeah, I guess when you're raised, you're proud to be an American. You hear about how great your country is. You learn your history, and the president is somebody that we normally try to respect, and we elect this person to represent us. And all of a sudden, somebody had shot the president, and this first of all was terrible and shocking and just simply unbelievable. And so you just had to know what was going to happen. I know this sounds kind of crazy, but it was fascinating. As bad as it was fascinating because you couldn't believe it was happening. So you were glued to the TV.
I can sort of understand what you're telling me because I can sort of imagine what that would be like if the same thing happened to Mr. Obama.
Sure.
Where were you when it happened? If you can remember.
Sure. I was in the basement of my house. I was in the 4th grade, but I didn't go to school that day because I was sick. I had sore throat, tonsils. My tonsils were always giving me trouble. And we lived in Battle Creek, Michigan. My father was an Air Force pilot, fighter pilot, and we were living on Custer Air Force Base, Battle Creek, Michigan, where they make Kellogg's cereal, by the way. And so I was sick at home. It was down in the basement because that's where we had the family room. We made, had their pool table and a television. You got to remember that television, there was no cable, and there was no computers, so you only had like 5 channels, usually black and white. I know everybody thinks that makes us really old, but
people like black and white.
That's right. We like the black and white. But anyway, I was watching. It was a little after noon, so I was watching some cartoons. And my mom was upstairs washing dishes or something, and I was all bundled up on the couch, and all of a sudden they came on the TV and said, "We interrupt this program." The president, he didn't say the president had been killed. They said that somebody had taken shots at him, that they were afraid that the first report said that he had been hit. And so I went, "Mom, Mom!" And she said, "What is it, honey?" And she comes downstairs, and I said, "The president's been shot." And she was like, "What?" And then she got scared and said, "Oh, my goodness." We knew that, and then my dad came in not long after that and told us that he was going to probably be gone for a while because they were closing the base and putting everybody on alert. You have to remember that during this time, America was always afraid of going to war with Russia. Russia was it's a long story, but you guys will learn about it in your school. There was something called the Cold War going on, and everybody was always thinking that we were about to have World War III. So the very first, when the president was shot, the first thing people thought was the Russians were doing it. And so my dad, being an Air Force fighter pilot and a colonel, he had to quickly go back to work and close the base and go on alert in case we were about to be attacked.
I'm sure that if they knew that would happen, they would probably cancel school anyways.
Yes, they did. As a matter of fact, they did cancel school. Because my 2 brothers were in high school, and they sent them home.
Did his death influence you?
Oh, yes. I think it influenced a lot of people. He was a young president. The first time we'd ever seen this young, nice-looking guy with a very beautiful wife and 2 little teeny kids. And he just seemed like this you know, just a really, nice guy and young, and he had young ideas. He was the one that said we should go to the moon before the end of the 1960s, and we did. But he really wasn't in office long enough. You know, that was his first term, and he wasn't even up for re-election until the next year. So he was only in the White House for 3 years, and then he was killed tragically right down the street. And
At the grassy knoll.
at the grassy knoll, right, just a couple blocks from here.
Do you think there is a conspiracy, like with Oswald and the government?
Well, I used to think that stuff. I used to, when the conspiracy talk first started up, I found it very interesting, and I read the books and everything. But after many, many years, I am now convinced that there was no conspiracy.
And that Oswald.
Yes, Oswald did it. Lots of people like to put a lot of different things on it because I think they try to make it, to have more meaning, because nobody wants to believe that just some demented guy managed to do something like that, but he did.
Will you always remember this as a lesson or a consequence?
Wow, what a question.
I came up with that one myself.
That's pretty good. A lesson or a consequence? It's kind of both. The consequences were, you know, a country in turmoil, and there's no telling what would have happened if he had stayed president. We'll never know that. But the lessons, and of course there are many lessons, we protect our presidents more. They don't drive around in cars with the top off anymore, ever.
You've learned much about him.
Yes, and yeah. From him, his legacy, sure. So it's a lesson and a consequence, sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you think he was a good president?
I think he was. I think he was a good president. He was only, like I said, he wasn't president for very long. We'll never know how good. I think he could have done. He could have
more. He could have grown over the years.
Well, I think he could have. I think his civil rights record was not great, but he did keep us from going to war with the Russians. That we came this close to an atomic war, and yet we kept us out of that. So yeah, there were good and bad, but I think he could have grown into a great president if he'd been given a chance.
And the last question. Well, you probably just explained it to us when you were talking about you in 4th grade, but do you still think that news is important? I know that I do, but most people, children don't, but do you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, now I'm an old guy, so news is very important to me. I love the news. The news is just, you know, when you're a kid, you don't want to watch the news. It seems like it's boring until something like this happens, and then all of a sudden it wasn't boring anymore. It was extremely exciting in a terrible sort of way. The news is just what's going on around you. I mean, it's not really, there's no magic formula here. It's just what happens in the world, and I think it's important to know what's going on so you can respond to it and make up your mind about things and who to vote for. And so, yeah, the news is
important.
Yeah, it's very important.
Thank you, Mr. Clower. This is Amelia Donahue reporting live. Thanks again for watching these important messages.